God, the things I do for you. The door is closed. Why? So I sound better. No echoes, no fan noise. There's no AC in this room, and I'm sweating my butt off on This Is Going Well, I Think, with David Cooper. I am David Cooper. It's This Is Going Well, I Think, the show where no one's listening, no one cares. That show where every episode's the last episode. We have got just an amazing lineup for you tonight. Our first topic, one that's near and dear to my heart. Fungus! That's right, I'm going to talk to one of the world's foremost fungus experts on whether a pandemic, epidemic, humanity-ending event could happen, just like it did in the show Last of Us, where fungus creates zombies. May seem far-fetched, but maybe not as far-fetched as you would hope. God, I love fungus. Then I'm going to have someone on who's a paramedic who recently wrote something that I really connected with. The article was admitting that he was an addict, but how the harder part came after admitting he was an addict, confronting his demons. We're going to relate our stories of addiction, depression, trauma. I know it sounds heavy, but it should be a great conversation. After that, someone who's a coach to millionaires. And they've got a great method for whether you should spend money on stuff, whether you should splurge or save it, and in the process, make your money work for you. I have no idea what making your money works for you means, but maybe we'll figure it out. Then finally, a speaker on behalf of Anxiety Canada is going to chat with me about anxiety, OCD. A lot of people suffer from this stuff privately. And if you or anyone you know has dealt with debilitating anxiety, you're going to love this interview. That is our lineup. That is the show. I'm going to start today a little different. I'm actually going to invite a guest on in just a minute. And we're going to try out something a little bit new. Ooh, what is it? But first, this. We are here with foreign correspondent Tony Five. Tony, welcome.
Hello, David. How are you?
We did something a little strange this morning. We had a show meeting. It was my agent, it was our producer Danny, it was you, and it was the intern. And it felt like we were doing something real for a moment, and it was very supportive and nice, and Rob, my agent, really believes in us, and it was just like this strange thing. What did you make of that meeting? Because I walked away thinking, maybe I am a radio professional.
It was an absolute love fest. The way they all went round the table saying how amazing you were, I had to come in and chime in with something insane about you. It was beautiful, and I thought you were going to tear up. They were saying how wonderful you are and how amazing you are and how they believe in you, and I was sitting there
I know, I was in physical pain when they were saying that they believed in me. Like I was holding my body in the fetal position because it was so painful for me to accept a compliment. But I also was thinking, like, what are my parents secretly paying these people to be nice to me? That's where my brain always goes.
Agreed, and they came up, we brainstormed, I guess, and we spoke about the show, and they had some ideas on getting more than 3 people listening to it, and I guess, yeah, there was some experimental stuff that I think would be kind of a good idea, I guess. Which one do you want to go with first?
Well, that's what brings me to the reason I brought you here, and the reason I'm starting the show with you. One thing that came up is that we miss, not just me, you, our producer, presumably the listener, they missed that live feel of doing commercial radio where you could get phone calls. And so without getting too much into the details of it, I figured out a way to get phone calls from weirdos on the internet. All you have to do is give them a prompt, they'll call. And I want to try that out with you, Tony, today.
David, if you build it, it will come. As Kevin Costner said in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
That's exactly what Mel Gibson said when he got pulled over by that cop and went on the anti-Semitic rage. Okay, what is our topic for these people? What should we fill in with the prompt here?
Right, I guess, if we're going to use me, maybe just speak to an Englishman. Maybe, what they want to ask me. Maybe they've got some really in-depth questions. Something hard-hitting, something newsworthy, something political. How we Brits over the Atlantic think, work, walk.
AABPA. Ask a British person anything. All right, without further ado, let's roll the calls. Hello, you're on with David and Tony. What is your question to ask an Englishman? Caller Jamie is your name.
Hey, Jamie, are you there? Jamie, put your hand up if you can hear me.
Jamie.
This is going fantastically, David.
This is not going well.
On our inaugural call-in show, David.
This is not going well at all. I think they're there and they're just not saying anything.
Okay, Jamie, if you can hear us, send a carrier pigeon.
Hello, how's it going?
And Jamie's a woman, David. This is amazing.
Jamie, you're on with Tony from England. What is your question from Tony? He's very British. He's almost too British, we might say.
Oh, my.
Jamie, before you ask the question, I want to say congratulations. You are our first ever caller to this. I mean, in the future, this will be known. It will be like Neil Armstrong landing on Mars. This is phenomenal. So, Jamie, go for it. Ask me any question you like, and I will answer in the most appropriate way an Englishman can answer. Jamie, the floor is yours, my lovely.
Jamie?
Fantastic. Absolutely phenomenal work there.
You didn't shut up. You didn't let her talk.
I was bigging her up, David. Let's hope Jamie gets back again.
Let's hope. We can only hope.
All right. Next time, David, what I'll do is I'll just let them talk.
Yeah, that seems like an appropriate plan.
Okay, cool. I'm ready. You talk.
Hello, Mittens. You are on with David and Tony. Tony is from England, and you can ask him whatever you want, inappropriate, appropriate, or otherwise. How you doing, Mittens?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Oh, my God. We're so happy to hear your voice.
Absolutely.
Hey, Mittens. I'm going to introduce myself. My name's Tony. This is the wonderful podcast hosted by David Cooper. You can ask me, a genuine Englishman, anything you like. And go for it. The floor is yours.
What do you truly think of Americans?
Hate them. Thank you so much, Mittens. That was absolutely phenomenal. Now, that's all I want to know. Mittens, Americans, I like your chicken. I think you've brought some wonderful cinematic movies. I do find it very strange that you guys don't travel and that you hate black people so much. But apart from that, phenomenal people.
Do you think Americans have funny accents?
No, it's a strange thing, Mitz, because, can I call you Mitz? I think basically because I grew up with American shows like Friends and Big Bang Theory and all that, the accent is so familiar. But like your accent is cool. Whereabouts are you from, Guy?
I'm from the state of California, west coast of the United States.
Okay, so for example, that connotates to me things like Baywatch and shooting people, lots of drugs.
Baywatch, shooting people, and drugs. Those are three great California things you've listed there. Is that mapped to what you know of California, Mittens?
Exactly. I think it's exactly what I think of when I think of California. Shooting people is probably top of the list.
Cool. Tell me a little bit about you, Mittens. What's going on? What do you do? How old are you? Where do you go? What do you do for fun? Why are you calling this radio show? What is going on in your life, Mittens?
I'm calling this radio show because I'm getting paid a little bit of money to call you guys. So.
Commercialism. You know what? I like your capitalist behavior.
Exactly.
Carry on. Right, so you've got the money, so that's the reason. Next.
All right, Mittens, you got paid. Thank you for the call.
Yes, sir. Take care, guys.
Cha-ching!
Don't spend it all at once, Mittens.
Hello, David. You are on the air with another David and Tony, and you can ask a British person whatever question you want. But first off, how are you doing, my friend?
Hello, sir.
Hello. How are
Now,
you, David?
I'll be honest, you're not David, but my name's Tony.
Hello, sir. Could you tell us a bit about yourself?
I mean, 3 of them, which would be lovely. And where are you? And have you got your extended warranty sorted out?
Yes, sir. I am very happy.
You're very happy. I'm very happy.
And tell about yourself.
Listen, David, I am really happy, but how happy are you on a scale of 1 to really happy?
I am very happy and I am very enjoyment.
You're very enjoyment. I'm very enjoyment all the time. Where are you from? Is that a Californian accent?
Because I am very happy mood now.
Oh, that's lovely, David. So where are you from?
Sir, about yourself, you are happy or not?
Yeah, like country? What country are you from?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, no, man. That question, it always wins the ladies over. But what country are you from?
Sir, I am asked one question.
Also, like Coldstream. Are you happy?
Hello, sir. What are your favorite food? I am very exciting to your answer.
My favorite food?
Favorite food? Okay, that's a good question. Tony, what is your favorite food?
Lamb chops. David, what's yours?
Spaghetti.
Right, what's your favorite food, David?
Sir, Sir, please tell answer. I'm very exciting.
Listen, I'm more exciting than you're exciting, and I'm more very happy than you're very happy. So where are you from? What country? Africa, India, Baltimore?
Oh, Indian food. What is your favorite Indian food?
Curry. Or no, tikka masala. How about you?
Poppadoms. I like tagliatelle.
What is your favorite Indian food?
Sir, my favorite food is pizza, burger, coke.
I mean, you sound like a true patriot.
All right. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. What is happening?
David, she was fantastic, David. I want her back next week.
She was something. I'll give you that much. Wow. What a... I have no idea what that was, Tony, but I do know it was something. Why would that person tell the call screener their name was David is the real question I have right now.
Why? Because they were naming themselves after the legend. They were nervous, but I think she could go all the way, David. I'll be honest with you. We could leave. She could take this show to heights. I mean, she could do a touring show in Vegas if she needed to.
Tony, I have just one question for you. Are you happy?
David, I am excited. I am happiness. And I love pizza and burgers. I'm a patriot, David.
All right, I got to figure out a way to make these weirdo callers a regular segment. Tony, thanks for doing it with me. Thanks for testing this out. It was special. I'll leave it at that.
David, this is a race to the bottom, and we just won.
Fungus. We are about to discuss fungus with a highly decorated expert in the field. I'm going to ask him if that TV show, The Last of Us, is actually possible. What should we be worried about and what a fungus epidemic would look like? And I might try to get some advice from him, how to deal with a rash that I got going on, what cream to use. Never mind. Fungus zombies up next. We are here to discuss fungus, cordyceps, a topic I love and a topic my body is regrettably covered in. I'm here with a Bloomberg Distinguished Professor of Molecular Microbiology and Immunology and Infectious Diseases at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and the Johns Hopkins School of Public Medicine. His book, What If Fungi Win, is available wherever books are sold. I'm very excited to announce Arturo Casadevall. Arturo, thanks for being here. I appreciate your time.
David, thank you so much for having me.
You are the fungus man. Can we just get tinea out of the way? I got it on my body right now. I'm treating it with Lamisil. Is that the right choice to get rid of it?
You know, a lot of things work. I mean, all these the thing about the dermatophytes is that they are very resilient and things take a long time to often eradicate them. So, you know, it just takes a long time. Anybody who has had athlete's foot know that you got to keep putting the cream on for a while.
I have it on my back and I'm not very flexible. And so my girlfriend puts it on for me. If that's not love, I don't know what is. But we didn't come here to talk about my fungus. We're going to talk about The Last of Us. Do you want to give me just a little brief overview of what the fiction is? So there's this fungus called cordyceps. I've seen it with ants, insects. It's horrifying what it does to bugs. Of course, it has never jumped to mammals. Is my understanding of that correct?
That's right. So, David, I have never seen the series, and I found out about it when my email got filled in by people writing me and said, "Did you advise them?" And you know, I didn't know what this was about, so I looked it up, and there was an introduction to it. There's an introductory segment that you can see. Free, you know, it's in YouTube. And I looked at this and I said, oh my God, this is what I've been writing about for many years. And the idea is that with climate change, one of the fungi will adapt to be able to grow a higher temperature. You know, what do I mean by higher temperature? Your temperature, my temperature, 37 degrees or 98 degrees Fahrenheit, depending how you measure it. And when that happens, then it's going to be able to take shop on people and turn them into zombies. It's science fiction.
I think the things we're scared of, you know, extinction level events, maybe a huge volcanic eruption that kind of junks our atmosphere enough to kill us. There's always the asteroid that hits Earth. There's the fear that nuclear weapons will be deployed and just destroy the Earth. You know, the major superpowers will go to war and that'll be the end. But people rarely think of fungus. I think they think of pandemics, viruses, bacteria, but they don't think of fungus. And so how far-fetched is this fiction that a fungus that can decimate an insect population could jump to mammals?
So, David, there are two important things you're bringing up. So the first one is, why don't people think about this, fungi? They're worried about viruses, they're worried about bacteria, they're worried about parasites like malaria. And the reason is that we have tremendous resistance to the fungi. And that's coming from our temperature. Our temperature can keep out most fungal species out. The problem is that as the planet gets warmer, the fungi are going to have to adapt or die. And that's where the concern arises. Are there things out there that if they adapted and they could now grow on you because they have adapted to higher temperatures, will bring new infectious diseases? And many of us believe that that is the case. Second part of your question has to do with all of us. How likely is it? Well, I always give the same answer. It's unlikely, but not impossible. Why is it unlikely? Because the truth is that we don't really have any precedent for a fungus taking over a person and turning into a zombie. On the other hand, you always have this little voice at the back of the brain, my brain at least, that says, yeah, but fungi make LSD.
They can mess with our brains, can't they?
If a fungus can make you hallucinate and see things, who knows? So therefore, we don't rule it out, even though I think it's improbable.
Okay, improbable, but not 100% improbable.
Impossible.
What are the scary ones? Cordyceps comes to mind. I don't know if it is, in fact, the most scary and dangerous one. It's just when we see what cordyceps does to insects, it's like horrifying. It infects their body. It controls their brain. I mean, can you tell me a little bit about the scary ones?
If you're an insect, I think the cordyceps are pretty scary. For us, though, the cordyceps are not a threat, at least not yet. I think the biggest threats for us are the fungal diseases that we know that can basically cause very severe illnesses in people. But we have had one example of a new fungal disease that emerged about a decade ago called Candida auris. And that was unknown to medicine up to around 2010, 2011. And then all of a sudden appeared in 3 different continents. And nobody really knows what happened there. So some of us have argued that this could have been due to climate change, that it was there all along in the environment. It was already armed to the teeth to cause disease, but it couldn't really cross to humans because humans were warmer. And then it adapted, and now it's a major problem.
And our body's ability to fight this thing by raising the temperature, fever, you're saying it's just well, you didn't say, but my understanding is it's just a degree or two too high to kill off these things. And as these things adapt, evolve, their threshold goes up a degree or two. And that's when it's a real problem.
That's right. That's right. I mean, they live in the environment. They're used to environmental temperatures. Environmental temperatures are much cooler than your body. But, they're there. They're causing disease in plants. They're causing disease in insects. They're causing disease in vertebrate animals that are cold-blooded. And I worry that this adaptation could defeat our heat defenses.
So fungus is everywhere. If we look at like the tree of life, I mean, they're doing pretty well, and they've been around a long time. And for such microscopic things, they've evolved amazingly to date. Is what I just said true?
They are a most remarkable kingdom. People don't realize that they are our closest relatives.
Well, sorry, say that again. They're our closest relatives? What does that mean?
So we are animals, and the fungi are the animal's closest relatives. So even though a fungus doesn't quite look like an animal, if you did DNA analysis or something, they're a lot closer to us than they are to plants.
Whoa.
In fact, their metabolism is very similar, and that is a problem because when you try to make antifungal drugs, you got to find a difference between you so you don't get hurt and the fungus. And they are often so similar that it's hard to make antifungal drugs.
And then when you make them and you use them and you don't use them properly, you just treat it till it visually goes away but doesn't go away. It's sort of like antibiotic resistance. If you use the cream and you don't kill it well enough, it's going to adapt, and that's how we get drug-resistant fungus. Is that?
That's one thing, but the other side of it is, for reasons that we don't understand very well, they tend to be chronic. It just takes a long time, for example, to clear a skin infection of fungi. When they get into the lungs, for example, bacterial pneumonia, you can treat in 2 weeks. Fungal pneumonia, when it happens, you have to treat for months. They happen to be quite resilient in tissue, and they hold on, and it's just hard to get rid of them.
Why the obsession with fungus? Why the interest in fungus? You're the person they call when people see on TV The Last of Us, because you're the expert. Where does this passion come from? Like, why are you so interested in this little tiny thing, and where does it come from?
It's all about our experiences. So when I was in medical school, I actually wasn't interested in infectious disease. I was interested in cancer. And then when I had my training, the biggest problem that we were facing at the time was AIDS. And imagine this disease came out of nowhere, and it was killing young people who were healthy up to that point. And many of these infections were fungal. So I became interested in the fungi when I saw what happens when your immunity can go down.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's how I spent my life working on it, because I saw the devastation they can bring. There are two things keeping us healthy: temperature and immunity. AIDS, cancer therapy, transplants weaken the pillar, and then you get fungal infections. You can't really weaken temperature because we can't go around life being cold. But what if they can jump over it? That's where the concern is.
Interesting. Okay, we're here with Arturo Casadevall. He is a distinguished professor of molecular microbiology and immunology. We're talking fungus. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about The Last of Us, what it could look like if I don't even know what you'd call it, a fungus pandemic happened to all mammals and life on Earth. We're here with Arturo Casadevall. He's a Bloomberg Distinguished Professor of Molecular Microbiology and Immunology and Infectious Diseases at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. That is a mouthful. Check out his book. It's called What If the Fungi Win? It's available wherever books are sold. Arturo, I really appreciate you coming here. I love fungus. I'm obsessed with it. I always do weird kind of content about fungus, but you're kind of a very, very serious expert. You got the call when Last of Us aired, and it was the first you'd ever heard of the series, or I guess up until that point, the video game, right?
That's right. The emails basically say, "Hey, Arturo, have you seen this? Did you advise them?" They seem to be running with this idea that the fungi can adapt. And my answer was, well, this stuff is in the public domain. I suspect that somebody may have run into it, or maybe they thought of it independently, but certainly it fits.
So let's talk about what would happen if some of these more creative funguses were to infect us. Maybe not the ones that just cause, I don't know, pneumonia in your lungs and kill you or cover your skin.
So I think that's a really good question, David. Why are we see no fungal epidemics?
Yeah.
Even when a lot of people get immunosuppressed. And the reason is they tend not to be contagious. You tend to acquire them from the environment. The ones that are contagious are things like athlete's foot, skin fungus, and those you tend to get by contact in some way, or perhaps visiting a site that is infected. What would cause a big change would be if you, for example, had a fungus that could get into your lung, reproduce, make spores, and when you cough, it would be contagious. That would now put the fungus in the realm of the viruses.
Do we see that in any animals? Has that happened in the animal kingdom before?
It doesn't. I don't know, actually, because we know so little about the animal kingdom. It certainly happens with plants when the plants don't cough, but the wind spreads the spores.
Interesting.
So, there are 6 million fungal species out there. Is there one fungus that can get into your lung, germinate, make spores? And the answer is statistically possible. Just because we don't know it doesn't mean it's not there. And I go back to the Candida auris example. This is a fungus we had no idea about until it began turning up in people.
Interesting.
So I think that is the kind of scenario which is theoretical, because right now, and I would say emphasize that for the listeners, we don't know if it can happen, but that's how it may happen.
So if you had to estimate a percentage there, it's like what I know it's hard to estimate, but are we talking 0.0001? Like, what are we talking here?
I can't even give you that number, because if you were to find one, right, then you were dealing with a big problem. But the things are changing, and just because, the fungi are evolving too, that would be my concern. My concern will be the emergence of a fungus that is currently unknown to medicine, that can get into people's lungs, that it can germinate there, make spores, and then be contagious. Then you're dealing with the outline for a fungal epidemic.
And what are some of the most strange, weird, scary symptoms that funguses that can infect certain animals? I think cordyceps comes to mind. What could the possible symptoms of such an infection be?
The other example of a fungus that affects mammals is what is known the white nose syndrome of bats. So this was a fungus that was unknown to 2006 in North America. Since then, it spread all through the country. It's killed millions of bats. And the bats are resistant in the summer. Why in the summer? Because they're 37 degrees. They're your temperature. And then what happens is that in the winter, they have to hibernate. There are no insects out there, so they drop their temperature to 10 to 12 degrees. And when they do that, the fungus can grow in them. If you take the bats and you bring them into the lab and you feed them, just feeding them and giving their temperature goes up, they can clear the infection. There you have a situation in which the fungus is spread by contact, but it damages their skin. And when it damages the skin, they begin to lose their fluids.
They just bleed out?
It's not so much blood. They ooze out, what would be equivalent of electrolytes, serum, like that. They're in great deal of distress. They wake up in the middle of winter, there is no food, and they die.
Wow. Well, I guess, is it really just temperature that seems to protect us? That's kind of scary that's our last line of defense against something like this.
Well, I think that what it illustrates is the degree to which temperature is protecting us. Temperature is protecting. We don't think about it, right? You don't think about just the fact that you're warm going through your day, that is keeping a lot of things away. And I think that's been a major insight in the last couple of decades. The temperature is a major form of protection against microbes.
So I got to worry, climate change, I got to worry about like sea levels rising. I got to worry about heat waves. I got to worry about all these horrible things that climate change would do. And it seems like this one, however unlikely, is still one that we potentially are adding to the list by emitting greenhouse gases and living the way we do.
Unfortunately, it's one more concern. There is already evidence that the fungi are adapting. For example, there have been studies in which you look at fungal species in cities. Cities are heat islands, as you know. All the concrete, that you're a few degrees a lot warmer than the outside. So when you compare the fungal species from the city and those from rural areas, the ones in the fungal cities are already more temperature adapted. They can grow at higher degrees. So it's already happening. And I think it's whether we're going to get into trouble or not, it's a matter of luck. But I think we need to be aware of it and try to be as prepared as we can.
That's so wild. Okay. Are there any other future predictions that with funguses that may not affect us as people, that climate change could cause adaptations, that we would see weird stuff maybe with plants, maybe with insects, maybe with other animals, that's perhaps more likely than this huge jump to humans?
I think that we're going to see a lot of, for example, you could have the range of fungi change. There is a fungus that lives in the Southwest known as Coccidioides in the desert. If you have increased deserts or more dry areas, you could see expanding into areas that are very different than they are now. I think that as you change the climate, you change the flora, you change the soils, you're basically changing everything. But I want the listeners to think about one thing. I want to leave them with an optimistic note. We've been talking about bad news, okay?
Yes.
Fungi are really, really important for life on Earth. They give us drugs like penicillin, the statins that many people take.
And blue cheese. They give us delicious food.
Exactly. Great food. For the wine that you drink, yeah, that's fermentation from the fungi.
The bread, the yeast in the bread.
The fungi are largely our friends. They decay, they digest matter. Without them, things will pile up. They recycle nutrients. So yes, we need to worry about some bad actors, but overall, this is a wonderful kingdom that really helps life on Earth.
Is it possible fungus could save us? Like fungus that eats garbage, fungus that eats carbon dioxide and spits out oxygen at a rate that, fungus that breaks down nuclear waste. I mean, I've heard these wild claims that, as we go into the future, new chemicals will be invented, new scientific processes will be invented. Reversing climate change, however unlikely, could come from a technological advancement.
Some of the things you mentioned are not out of the realm of possibility. Let me give you an example. There is increasing evidence that the fungi store vast amounts of carbon under the soil. So if you can figure out how to make them happier, perhaps they can store and take vast amounts of carbon and help us with the atmosphere. The fungi make a pigment called melanin that can sequester the same melanin with skin like radionuclides. So this can be used in cleaning up areas in which there are radioactive spills and so. And people have been working on adapting fungi to break down plastics. So there's a lot of work in trying to get this big, powerful kingdom to help us.
So it's a race between will the kingdom destroy us or will the kingdom save ourselves from us?
Yeah, well, I'm an optimist, and I always look at the glass as half full.
Arturo, this was a really fun conversation. Thanks for doing it with me.
Thank you for having me, David.
Arturo Casadevall. Check out his book, What If the Fungi Win? You can buy that wherever books are sold. Next, we're going to talk to someone who recently wrote an article I was particularly struck by. It's a story about overcoming addiction and how the hard part came after the man stopped using. We're going to talk both our stories and talk addiction, recovery, sobriety. I'm pretty excited about this one. We are here to talk addiction, recovery, what it's like when you finally tell yourself that you're an addict, and then what happens the next day. I'm here with Matthew Heneghan, author of A Medic's Mind, Woven in War. He hosts the accompanying podcast. He's a former military medic, a civilian paramedic, and he's navigated the challenging terrains of trauma, recovery, and personal growth. Matthew, did I get that all right?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and thanks for the gracious intro. It's great. Thank you.
It's the only thing I will get right in this interview. I saw a great article that you wrote, and I resonated with me. I never went to rehab. I don't go to NA or AA, but I do say I'm in recovery. Maybe I'm I don't know. Maybe I'm appropriating. It's unclear to me.
No, I mean, yeah, I did go to rehab, yes, but I've never attended an AA meeting outside of rehab. It has its place, and I'm not in any way invalidating it or trying to downplay it.
No,
it's just for me personally. My reasons for drinking were very, specific to me and my trauma and the things that I was trying to do. But the way that I stayed sober was by just continually navigating that confrontation with trauma, like dealing with therapy and connecting with friends and trying to find a way to navigate the world sober. And the more things that I found to do that helped. And so therefore AA wasn't really what kind of guided me forth to where I'm at right now. I was just saying, I don't think you're appropriating anything at all. I think everyone's got their own journey, and there's not one size fits all. If there was, we would be able to cure addiction, I think. So,
right. The reason I was struck by your article is, for me, one thing I noticed is when I cleaned up my act, when I quit, first I quit Xanax. I was mixing benzos with booze, which is a dangerous combo. I quit the Xanax, and then the booze got really bad. And then I sobered up. And why I liked your article and why I liked the title, admitting I was an addict was hard, then came the even harder part. For me, it wasn't rehab. It was that next day realizing all those same problems, all those same structures in my life, the me, like everywhere you go, there you are. Nothing changed. People like to think getting sober is like this hero's journey. You go through your trials, your tribulations, waking up on the bar floor, you know, almost dying, overdosing, whatever it is. And then you clean up and it's over. But really, to me, the story starts that next day. And it's like a kind of a boring story. But it's, for me, the hardest part of this story. And that's why your article kind of struck with me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I appreciate that. And, you know, I feel the same way. You know, when rehab was hard, obviously getting sober was hard. But then everything that came next. So like the stuff that kind of motivated my drinking, it hasn't gone away. The trauma that I went through doesn't just disappear. The things I've seen and the things that bother me don't just fade into the ether of obscurity and they're no longer around. Like they're still there. It's just that I found new ways to handle those things. And the only way that I could have found those ways was by becoming sober, because for me, I was utilizing alcohol in a way of trying to numb everything, trying to not feel anything. Oh. But then when I got sober, I felt everything, and it was excruciating.
Feeling too hard, I think, is what drove me to it too. And the problem is when you go through withdrawal, you're irritable, you're sensitive, you're more anxious than you would be in your, you know, sober state. And so you feel even harder. And what's the cure that you reach for? You know, booze, pills, needles, whatever it is. And it creates this horrible feedback loop of everything's painful and the substances help, but yet the substances contribute to that pain. And that's what I was stuck in. You talked about acceptance and you talk about traumas in your life. Well, what's your relationship with kind of like who you were when you were drinking and then acceptance of some of the things that drove you to it now?
Oof.
I feel like I said it really quickly, but it's such a heavy question.
Yeah, it's you may have said it fast, but it hit hard. So you did good. It's oh man. When I think back to when I was drinking, I was in such a weird place. You know, I think the biggest case in point I can mention was, as you kind of alluded, I worked as a paramedic. Mm-hmm. And so working as a paramedic, we respond to a lot of incidents that involve alcohol and vehicles. And I've seen young, old, and in between that are, unfortunately, their lives are cut short because of that act or because of somebody else, you know, utilizing that act of drinking and driving. And in 2015, I got arrested for a DUI. And it wasn't because I, you know, felt like it happened to other people and not me. I wasn't even thinking about ramifications. I wasn't thinking any further ahead than just trying to stop what was hurting so badly. So I didn't think about it in terms of, man, I shouldn't do this because of X, Y, and Z. Those things weren't even in the playing field. And so now, as I got sober, and even now, sometimes when the anniversary of my DUI kind of reels around, it's hard. I still feel quite a bit of shame. I actually still have a hard time driving. I didn't get my driver's license back willingly. I didn't get it back until last year. Whereas I could have got it back within a year of the actual incident, and I just didn't get it back till last year. And even now I have a hard time just because I still harbor a lot of guilt. But it's something I'm working on. It's something I'm working through. So there's a lot of contextualization that happens when I think about myself back when I was drinking and stuff like that to who I am now and the places I've come to. So it's probably we could dedicate a whole show just to that specific topic, and I bet you'd have a lot to weigh in on as well.
Yeah. It's funny, you talk about seeing the impacts of driving under the influence and doing it yourself. And I know forgiving yourself is your own journey. But I'm just struck by, look, I feel like something deeply human that we all have, whether it's with substances or not, is the ability to kind of hold two things in our head that are totally opposite and just ignore them. And that act of kind of ignoring them, that cognitive dissonance is very human. Like, I don't know, we destroy the planet and climate change is happening. You know, there are people who are in loving relationships who cheat on their partner, knowing that if that were to be found out, it would fracture their family. I think this is something we all have capacity for, and the choice to engage with that, I think, is where we have a lot of control. But I think we all have capacity for it, and when you're under the influence, it's just so easy to do. I've myself observed that. I mean, I have a motorcycle. I used to go to a bar, and after I would do stand-up comedy and have like 3 martinis, and drive my bike a few blocks home and leave my helmet on the bar. And then one night, one of the bartenders was like, "You have to stop." And I did it. I didn't stop drinking, but I stopped riding my bike there because it was like 3 blocks from my house. I don't even know what I was doing. I think I just wanted to look cool with a helmet on the bar, and it didn't even like get through my thick skull. So I never got arrested. I never hurt anyone. But I had capacity to not only hurt myself, but other people. And I did it, and I didn't get caught. So I don't have this like huge amount of shame other than right in this moment. Now that I think about it, I have a great deal of shame. I don't know. I think there's people that have done what you have done and didn't get caught, and society doesn't force that kind of shame on them. I realize I just went on a stream of consciousness rant, and I'm not even sure what the question is at this point.
No, I mean, I get what you're saying, right? The capacity for doing things that we just, deep-seated, we know better than, but we somehow either cognitively or unwittingly convince ourselves, in the moment that, this is fine, right? It's not a big deal, right? You don't, and sometimes you don't even think about the consequence of it, the responsibility of it. For me, that warm hit of whiskey, next to feeling the absolute torment of having been through a flashback or having not slept for a few days because of nightmares, and sometimes hearing screams, or for me, sometimes it was somebody would walk through the bar door. Usually it was blonde women, but there was a lady that I picked up once who was blonde lady, and she was very badly wounded, and unfortunately did not make it. And so sometimes there would be somebody that would walk through the door, and out of the corner of my eye, I would just catch a glimpse, and it would look exactly like this person that I knew it couldn't be.
Yeah.
And that is such a mind, can't really swear, but it's such a,
I mean, I can bleep it. You can say mind, it's fine. I mean, I think that's where we are in this conversation. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. That's exactly. And so I'd be sitting at this bar, and then I'd see that, and then I'd try to reconcile with reality and with what I was seeing. And then it was such a hard thing. So I take that swill of whiskey, and it was just that introduction of something new and biting and warm. And it was just a whole other feeling. And that's why I wanted more of it, because I felt like more of that would just nullify all these external things that were brutal. And so, even though if you had asked me pointedly if I knew better, I probably would have said, well, of course, yeah, it's not the right thing, but I did it. So I get what you were saying in your point. It makes total sense.
Well, you're engaging with the side of your brain. It's like, I just had this traumatic flashback. Some whiskey might help. And then that kind of side satisfied. And it's like, okay, I drove here. I got to get home. And these two parts don't connect.
Yeah.
At the center of that is like kind of a wanton disregard for your own and other people's safety. We all know that. But in that moment, they don't connect. And I think that can happen to a lot of people in a lot of little ways all the time. I think it's like one of the ugly sides of humanity that, we're all on a path to reconcile. I don't even know what we're talking about, but I'm enjoying talking about it. I'm here with Matthew Heneghan, the author of A Medic's Mind and Woven in War. We're going to continue this conversation in a minute. We are back with Matthew Heneghan, the author of A Medic's Mind, Woven in War. Those are available wherever books are sold. There's a Woven in War podcast. And you sound great on that microphone, my friend. So I'm not surprised there's a podcast. I am going to check it out after this. Matthew is a former military medic, a civilian paramedic, and he's navigated the challenging terrains of trauma, recovery, and personal growth. Thank you, producer Danny, for writing such a great introduction. Matthew, welcome back. How long have you been a civilian paramedic and a military medic? How long have you been in that field?
So cumulatively, I worked in that position for about close to 17 years, military and civilian combined.
I think when people think first responders, they kind of just picture the firefighter acting heroic and everything goes great and that's the job. That's the Disney version of the job. that is not the job, is it?
No, it has its perils. It has its pitfalls. There are moments that are gleeful, right? I don't know if I would consider it too like people would think, hey, have you delivered a baby? Yeah, I've delivered 3 in the back of an ambulance, and I got to tell you, I hate it every single time. It's messy. It's not fun. It's terrifying because you hope everything goes well.
And it's slightly painful for the woman in labor. That's what I've heard. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I've read a book or two, but that's what I've heard.
If there's one thing that paramedics taught me, is that women are unquestionably tougher than men.
Oh, yeah.
In so many different regards.
That's so obvious to anyone who thinks about it for 2 seconds. Yeah.
Like 2 seconds. It's just, yeah.
I mean, it must have its great moments where you come on the scene and someone has a fairly straightforward problem that's life-threatening, and you can administer assistance and basically, from their vantage point, save their life. But for you, I guess that's a Tuesday.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, it does happen. Diabetics are a big one. If their sugars run too low, and we get there and we're able to administer some sugars, and they go from being completely unconscious and looking like they're dead to awake and talking, and so those are the kind of wow moments where people are like, "Oh wow, what did you give her?" We're like, "Literally sugar." Yeah,
a prescription Jolly Rancher, like what?
Yeah, right. Like it's literally like you start an IV and you have this. It's called D50. It's just it's a big tube, and you pop off the caps like in the movies. You practice that. You just pop it off and you're in public. And
I'm picturing the 1800s. You're like a paramedic in, I don't know, a shipyard in England. And someone rides over on their horse being like, someone's dying from scurvy. And then you're like, I got a prescription orange. And you just give them, give them an orange.
Exactly. Yeah. You just peel the orange. It's just like, yeah, 100%. It's, not everything is life and death, like you do go to some mundane things. A lot of the job too is just comforting people, and sometimes you go to, elderly people who have lost their spouse. I mean, they were with somebody for 60 plus years, and all of a sudden that spouse passes away, and now they're left to navigate, an X number of years left of life alone, and their kids are grown up, or sometimes they don't have kids. And so now they have nothing really. And sometimes they call an ambulance just to have somebody to talk to at 3:00 in the morning.
Wow.
And, you can get kind of burnt out because, I mean, you've been running all day or all night up to that point. And then all of a sudden you get this clock, 3:00 in the morning call, and you show up and there's an old lady there who's put tea on and she's well dressed and she just wants you to hang out for a while, but she doesn't really have a complaint. And so you're battling this, well, I got to get back in service, but at the same time, I know exactly what you're doing. And so you have this human side of you where you're like, I would love to just sit down here and talk to you for a while.
Loneliness can be a killer. I mean, you must get called on scene when people are in a rough state where, like, I guess suicidal is the word.
Yeah. I mean, suicide is unfortunately a very large stock and trade of being a paramedic. Both with respect to the type of calls that we go to and also within our own community. Because, some of the things that you do go to, some of the inhumanity that you see, you really can't talk about it with anybody that isn't initiated to the job, right? You can't really go home and talk to your spouse about it if they're not a paramedic or a cop or a firefighter or even a nurse or a doctor. It's really tough to kind of convey that to them. And sometimes your partner just doesn't want to hear the things that you've seen because they are pretty jarring. And so you start to feel that loneliness yourself, when you come home from shift work and it's kind of the blue hours of the morning and everyone's either just getting up for work or going to bed and you're left alone. It can be tough. And so, yeah, suicide is a big part of a paramedic's career, both with respect to how many times you'll go and respond to it and how many times, unfortunately, you will be impacted by it by colleagues and people within the shared industries of police and fire.
Speaking more broadly about some of the tough things you deal with on the job, you had mentioned earlier that traumas were part of what would lead you to drinking. I don't want to misquote you. That's something you,
mounting traumas for sure.
And I'm just wondering what some of these struggles are. I mean, maybe not in graphic detail, that we don't think about when we think paramedics, but may well be common. I mean, not necessarily that it drives you to drinking or to any kind of mental health crisis, but that are just a part of the job. Like, I don't think, I mean, maybe now it gets talked about more, but yeah, I just don't think most people realize it. And I don't, I guess I kind of like do on a rational level, but I don't really, I can't begin to understand. So I was just wondering if you could say more about that.
Yeah, I think there's probably a conceptual level that most people operate with, understanding that the job of, first responder is pretty stressful and that they must see some things, but it's usually ephemeral in thought, right? Like you think about it and you go, yeah, it must be tough. And then you carry on and do the things you need to do. I think the biggest thing about first responders and about the job that we do is, especially if you do it over time, is the number of times that you're called to inhumanity, right? The number, like going to a murder scene is a really weird feeling. Just the whole scene itself is very odd. And there's a lot of precautions to be made and to take. You have to monitor where you're stepping. And so everything is very, very methodical, because you have to keep continuity of the scene, and the police are doing their thing and you're, attempting to do yours. But the scene itself, the energy of that area is such a unique thing that I've never felt at any other time in my life, thankfully. But, those things, those energies, you carry them with you for the rest of the day. And, in my opinion, for the rest of your life. But it's not just a guarantee that you're going to go to one murder in your career. You might go to many, especially people that work in bigger cities like New York, for example, or LA. I bet you those first responders and paramedics probably got lots of stories about that kind of stuff. And those are heavy energies to carry with you. And I think that's something to keep in mind, is that these are human beings wearing a specific uniform going to inhumane things. And that's a tough thing to carry.
Is there treatment options when it gets recognized amongst your coworkers, that they're struggling, be it falling into habits of addiction, mental health crisis? Are there good vehicles to help paramedics and, I guess, military medics and folks in this kind of first responding field?
So to answer this question, I have to be very specific to just myself, because
sure. I mean, you're in one jurisdiction. You've worked for, one
exactly.
Or, I live in New York. I used to live in Toronto. I used to live in San Francisco. Like, it's different everywhere. I get it.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I know for me, drinking was a fairly common thing among paramedics. And so talking about the things that bothered you wasn't really the first choice. I mean, there was a thing called critical stress debrief, which after a big call is what we call the bad ones, a big call, like a pediatric cardiac arrest or something.
Wow.
That you couldn't resuscitate. You kind of get brought into a room with everyone that was on the call, and they run around. It's kind of a round table where they ask you what went well, what didn't go well, how are you feeling, what are you going to do for the evening, or whatever time the call might happen, what are you going to do for the rest, or sometimes you just go back to work because it's easier. But there's been a lot of literature that suggests that critical stress debriefs are actually more detrimental than anything. And there is stuff in place, and there's more and more things coming into place now as time progresses. But we're still not, in my opinion, we're still not there yet. I don't know that I'm smart enough to tell you what we could do. I know that in a perfect world, I feel like paramedic training and first responder schooling and stuff would be longer, and thusly maybe have some more psychological checkpoints with an actual psychologist or a psychiatrist or mental health professional. But then you run into the risk of, if training's too long, then you don't have people out on the street, and then the system gets more. So there's a lot of things at play. So I can't say it with simplicity, but there are things that are there. They do have mental health assistance. I don't think it's where it needs to be just yet.
Matthew, thank you for talking to me. I really enjoyed this conversation. You're such a great talker. What a pleasure. What a mitzvah it is for you to show up on this show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure on my end too. Thank you.
Favorite, I don't know, I got to do something stupid. I can't just do a full serious interview. Favorite, I don't know, flavor of ice cream right now?
Oh, cookie dough all day.
Interesting. I don't know if I would agree with you, but there's this brown sugar cookie dough brownie flavor at an ice cream shop down the street, which is maybe the best thing I've ever tasted in my life.
Yeah, no, I'm all of a sudden craving it right now.
If you're ever in New York, Van Leeuwen's. I mean, I should try to get sponsorship from them, but as it stands, unpaid brand ambassador.
If I ever do go there, I will mention you by name.
And they will say, who is that guy? Please leave. Matthew, thanks again. I appreciate your time.
Of course, thank you.
Matthew Heneghan, an author of A Medic's Mind and Woven in War, and host of the accompanying podcast. He's a former military medic and civilian paramedic. Coming up, a mentor to millionaires who's going to show us how to be the boss of our money, how to meet our spending goals. And she's got a really neat trick. It's really simple. And people are saying this tip can help them ditch debt and retire early. So if you like money and having more of it, you're not going to want to miss this. We're going to hear... Let me try that. False start. We are here to talk crush your money goals, how to be the boss of your money, all kinds of capitalist wonder with Bernadette Joy, millionaire mentor and head of Crush Your Money Goals. Bernadette, thank you for talking to me. I'm looking to save my cash, so I feel like maybe I'm just trying to solicit free advice here.
Well, that was a smart way to do it by inviting me on the podcast.
You wouldn't be the first one. Free psychiatric advice, free medical advice, free computer advice. The list is long. It's not a bad.
That is the number one hack that we have here is if you want free advice from really professional people, then ask them to be in your podcast.
Interview them. I was reading an article when I discovered you about your $1 method. And I absolutely love it because I'm always thinking this. When I'm in a store, I'm looking at something. First of all, I'm thinking, when am I going to throw this out? Because I just got more clutter. And two, how much is this going to cost me over time? And I think I'll leave the way I look at it at that because I don't want to reveal too much of your method. Do you want to tell me about it?
Yeah. So it's pretty simple. Anyone can use it starting today. It's my $1 rule, which essentially helped me curb spending to say, I will only buy something at the store. And typically it's things like consumer goods, clothes, shoes, electronics and stuff, if it comes out to $1 per use. And it's just a quick and dirty way to make decisions and not feel guilty about spending on stuff that you know that you're going to actually use for a long time. And it also allows you to focus on more high quality stuff versus fast fashion and other things that, like you said, you're going to end up just throwing out one day.
Sort of like buy it for life stuff that you know you're going to have a very long time, or stuff that's not so expensive. So maybe you wear it 10 times, but it only costs $10.
Yes. But on the flip side, right? And I think this is where it came from was that I actually was, before becoming a money coach, I was in the fashion industry for several years. And I actually had a business where women would rent out dresses. And it was just fascinating to me how much we spend on things that we're only going to wear once or twice or even 3 times. So even if you were to buy a really cheap shirt and it costs $10, but you'll literally throw it out after one time, it's probably not a great purchase compared to the shirt that might be a little bit more expensive, but you'll wear it every week.
Interesting. So it's not always just buy the cheapest stuff. It's buy the most long-lasting stuff.
The most long-lasting stuff and the most useful stuff for you. So I actually had a client who threw this back in my face because I was complaining the one day about how my phone kept glitching and how I probably really needed a new phone. And she said to me, well, Bernadette, if you're going to use that phone for 3 years, then isn't that going to follow the $1 rule? Why are you still stressing about it? And I was like, ooh, I don't like it when I teach you things and then you throw it back at me. And so part of why I did the $1 rule too is because a lot of us sometimes are like, oh, I don't want to spend $1,000 on a couch, or I don't want to spend $1,000 on like a phone or a new laptop. But if you're going to use it every day, then it probably will end up coming out to $1 per use. So like, go ahead and buy the thing and move on with your life.
This I use to justify a nice mattress purchase. I'm not saying buy a $10,000 mattress, but you're on it half the day or 1/3 the day. At least invest in something pretty good that you like. If those who can't see, because this is a podcast, I'm getting a round of applause right now. Thank you.
I cannot applaud that. Mattress is one of the prime examples that I love for the $1 rule, because I don't know about you, I'm 39 years old. I cannot sleep on a cheap mattress anymore. My back just hurts way too much to be able to do that. And so a good high quality mattress that is supposed to last you 10 years will come out to way less than $1 per use if you're going to spend less than $10,000, like $10,000 or whatever, right? So I love that. That is such a good example.
You know, it's funny. We were talking at the beginning about inviting people on you need help from. I had a sleep coach that I invited on who recommended this exact thing. I called the segment Breaking Snooze live from the snooze room, and the sleep coach didn't like that. And I'm hoping you will. I don't know.
Oh my God. I love that. I think that's great. Also, along with the mattress, get some good covers, get a better pillow. Like, I have spent so much more money on sleep stuff because I am with you. Right now this week, I'm working on fixing my sleep. And a lot of people will spend $10 on a pillow when you could spend $30 maybe on a pillow and get a really nice pillow, and it will make such a big difference in your sleep. So that is such a great example of the $1 rule. And I would also say a place that I use the $1 rule a lot for myself tends to be like in the kitchen with appliances and stuff. I made the mistake of when I first got married. On our registry list, I for some reason thought that I needed a panini press and that I needed like whatever the fancy blender was at the time, 10 years ago.
I think it's still the KitchenAid, right? It's like the ubiquitous fancy blender.
Yeah. Well, the KitchenAid for the mixer, but there was like, you know how there is, all the juice blending things now, like all the fancy feel healthy or whatever. Point being, I never used that stuff. Now, to be fair, I circumvented the $1 rule then because I got someone else to pay for it at my wedding. But for myself now, when I think about the stuff that I use in my kitchen, for example, I will spend a lot more on a really good pan that's going to last a while from a nice brand than going to get one at Target that costs really cheap, but it's just going to break on you after a couple of uses. So stuff like that, I think is so good for the $1 rule, where it's things that you're going to use every day. And it's actually going to change your health and your mindset about what you should spend your money on.
This episode coincidentally brought to you by La Crusade Cookery. No, it's not. I don't think they sponsor podcasts.
Can it be? Can we ask them for?
Money coach. It's interesting. I spent 10 years working real hard in the tech industry in San Francisco. I got really lucky. I had a couple of exits. I saved a bunch of cash. I decided, according to my mother, and this is a direct quote from her, that I hate money. So now I'm trying to give a career in media a go. And you know what? She's not wrong. I must hate money. But I'm someone who might be like your ideal target here. Like, I am living off of savings. I made a bunch of money a year ago when I had a commercial radio job, but right now living off savings. What can a money coach teach someone who really wants to, I don't know, go about this smart? Like, they have a nest egg. It's not growing. They may be drawing from it. Maybe it's eating, the mortgage is eating away at it. Maybe they're between jobs. What can a money coach offer people like that? And what is it that you do?
Yeah. So great question. And also kudos to you and all those exits. That's awesome. So the first thing I heard right off the bat was that you're living off of savings. And one of the things that I really focus on with my clients is living off investments so that the money is growing, right?
Yeah. I consider my brokerage account to be savings. I don't keep cash lying around. I think, especially now with interest rates so high, you can just put it in a savings account and get 5%. Like,
I know, which is awesome. It's such a great time to be alive right now. It's in so many ways as a money coach, when there's so many easy ways, low risk ways to make money. So what I really do as a money coach, which is why I became a coach versus a financial advisor, is I focus on what do people actually want to do with their lives, and then how do we best deploy their money to get there as efficiently as possible. So not just the quickest way possible, but the simplest and with the least amount of energy. So I like to tell people that if you're someone who doesn't love to work, but wants to actually do work that is optional and what stuff that you really want to enjoy, I am kind of the ideal person to work with, because we figure out how to make your money do most of the work for you. And then you can spend most of your time doing the stuff that you want to do, even if it's something like your mom said, it doesn't make you a lot of money. So similar for me and my husband, we have a lot of interests outside of our day-to-day work. And my husband and I, I consider myself currently retired because all the work that I do now, I don't have to do. Like we have enough money to live off of that. And now the work that I get to do is because I want to, not because it's like forced upon me every day.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Try telling a Jewish mother that you are moving from your job as a senior manager at a Fortune 500 company to be in radio. Any Jewish mother would hate that. I'm not blaming her.
Well, your stuff about, I think there's a lot of similarities between Jewish moms and Filipino moms, because at least you went to a job in radio. I just went to I think I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I don't know what that means. And I was also at a Fortune 500 company, and I quit my day job to do what I'm doing now. And I think I have a feeling just, from the short time I got to meet you, that both you and I are going to make our moms proud. I think we're on the right path. They just don't understand it.
That's so sweet. Yeah. I don't know. Even if they are proud, they're probably just going to tell their friends and not me. But you know what? That's something that I'm going to talk about in the therapist that I solicit advice from on this show, probably.
Invite your therapist for some free therapy. But I can totally relate to that. And I'll say this is that a lot of what I have to do as a money coach is also untying some of our money beliefs from what we were raised. And who told us that? Anytime I hear someone say, well, I heard this, I'm like, well, who told you that?
Yeah.
And if it's from some version of our parents, and here's the thing, all our parents want is for the best, the best for us. That deep down, that's what your Jewish mom wants. That's what my very Asian mom wants. But what was best for them in the time that they were in their lives is very different from the world that we live in now, right? She probably is looking and being like, you can't make money in radio or media or whatever it is. But I can point to several examples. I actually have a friend coming next week who has made a killing doing this kind of work. And so, I am really grateful for people like you who have platforms like this, who are brave to go do stuff like this, because it is possible to make a good living and do the work that you love. And that's a lot of the stuff that I deal with people.
God, I wish we had more time. Okay, one more piece of advice that you might offer people that's not the $1 rule. The top piece of advice that if you got a minute in an elevator with someone that you would offer them to help them make their money, quote, work for them, which I still don't understand what that means, but piece of advice here.
I know, yeah. So the biggest piece of advice that I'll give you, because I think this is kind of the vibe of what I've seen from your work, is I will say, learn how to use emojis in your budget. And what I mean by that is that most people end up not doing a budget because it's boring, and it's usually an Excel spreadsheet, and it's soul sucking. And I actually teach people how to do budgeting that's fun and that actually reflects the person that you are. And if your budget doesn't have emojis, you're probably doing it wrong. And if you want to learn more about how to do that, you can follow me on social media, and I share how you do that.
Spreadsheets, they aren't that bad. I'm currently in the process of buying a house with my partner, and I found the spreadsheet to be actually a great reliever of stress, to know that we actually can do it rather than wondering and worrying and stepping into something we can't afford.
Yeah. And so, my thing is, like, I'm not against the spreadsheets. The spreadsheets are just not like living. It requires you to do most of the updating, right? So what I train people to do is to be able to have that be like a living, breathing document that they're using kind of all the time. And so I teach kind of a different way that's less spreadsheety, more planning, less tracking.
Cool. And you can find more about Bernadette Joy at crushyourmoneygoals.com. She's a millionaire mentor and the head of Crush Your Money Goals. Bernadette, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
In just a few moments, we'll have an interesting conversation about anxiety, how to deal with it, how to identify it in others, how to help them. This will be with someone from Anxiety Canada. Should be pretty interesting. So you have that to look forward to. Get the big radio voice going. We are here to talk OCD, anxiety, PTSD, all kinds of fun stuff. Just have a chat with Dr. Marlene Taube-Schiff, who works with Anxiety Canada and is a registered psychologist in Toronto. Marlene, I'm excited to jump in and talk, treatment, our stories, guest speaking, all kinds of fun stuff.
Thanks, David. Thanks so much for having me here today.
There is a certain irony. I mean, maybe you're fine with public speaking, but there's a certain irony of being a guest speaker on behalf of Anxiety Canada, just because guest speaking causes so much strife for so many people.
It does, actually. I have to admit that I experience a lot of anxiety when I come on to do these kinds of, podcasts as well. A little bit different than when I do public speaking, because I probably feel a little more prepared. It's sort of my own agenda in terms of having like a talk and things that I'm going to do. But yeah, I do experience anxiety before coming on to these kinds of occasions, for sure.
Cool. Yeah, no, I used to be scared to raise my hand in class like that, even when I knew the answer. And it was only through trying stand-up comedy did I push the bar so far into like public speaking that that now like public speaking's easy, because nothing's as bad as bombing in front of 100 people. I got to tell you.
Well, it's kind of like exposure, right? When we talk about that in terms of anxiety and pushing ourselves to do things at times that we might not want to do, but that are important to us and that feel valuable to us, sometimes we'll be willing, right, to make space for that anxiety in order to be able to do things that we find bring value to our lives.
So exposure therapy, that's one thing, but let's take let's drop down 100 levels here.
Sure. Yeah.
People say it like on TV, I have anxiety. What's behind it? What causes it? How do we differentiate someone who just has like a healthy, normal amount? Maybe they have it for a job interview and that's it. And someone who really it can be debilitating for.
Right. So, I mean, everybody has anxiety. Like you said, we couldn't actually function without it. It has its good places in terms of allowing us at times to feel the right amount of motivation, the right amount of fear, right, in dangerous situations. But as you mentioned right at the end of the question was the idea that when it becomes debilitating and it really impacts someone in terms of their ability to function either at school or at their job or in relationships and kind of multiple areas of their lives, we start to talk about how anxiety is very excessive at that point, right? And how we then start to understand that excessivity and other things that would go along with that might be signs that that person is experiencing what we then might call an anxiety disorder, right? So that functional impairment is such an important feature when it comes to us understanding that someone might have what we think of as more of a psychological disorder.
So with that disorder, can you describe it a little more? Like how it, the ways in which it can be debilitating, the ways in which, sort of, I guess, clinical anxiety, am I saying that correctly? Clinical anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. Clinical anxiety, which can take many different forms. You know, we think about social anxiety disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. We often think about what is the focus of the fear. So within all of these different kinds of disorders, there's often more of a focus of fear that we've used to understand that categorization of anxiety. So social anxiety, which was not what we were talking about exactly, but when you were sort of referring to that idea of public speaking, we can think about people that have really an excessive fear or avoidance around social situations due to a fear of being evaluated or judged negatively within those situations, such that they're not doing the things that, as you said, people with a little bit of anxiety might experience, but be able to push themselves through and do anyways.
So coping mechanisms, like I'm going to show you my fingernails right now. They're destroyed. Yeah. I'm at a place now where I'm like comfortable. I used to like hide them in photos and be really ashamed of it. Now I just kind of accept it. But I feel like I'm always chewing my nails as a way to just kind of comfort myself.
Right.
And I guess my therapist has encouraged me to view it as like, well, it's a choice I'm making. I am choosing not to stop because it provides me with some sort of comfort. What are the ways in which people who have these anxieties sort of cope with them, short of kind of seeking treatment, which we'll talk about in a bit? But there are people that say they have anxiety that still are able to function in professional environments. So what are the ways in which folks kind of cope when they have this stuff?
Yeah. So, I mean, the nail biting is actually, David, what we think about as a body-focused repetitive behavior, which is sort of a little bit different. It might happen in response to stress, but it might also happen at times when you're feeling bored or just for like a self-soothing piece, which doesn't mean anxiety isn't part of the picture. I was just throwing that out there because that's actually one of the OCD-related disorders, which falls into a different diagnostic category than anxiety for people. But in terms of coping strategies, and I love the example of like what happens if you have anxiety but can go to work. You know, a professional might see someone like that, and it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who sees a professional would need to be, you know, fully impaired, right, in terms of not being able to get up or do things, but they're certainly experiencing much more anxiety than they would want to, and that holds them back from living the life that they want. So, I mean, in terms of coping strategies, there's different kinds of coping strategies that we think about. You know, sometimes people will want to do more like self-directed coping strategies. And as you mentioned at the beginning, myself being, you know, affiliated with Anxiety Canada, and that's like an amazing resource in terms of like education and offering other like strategies that people can read about. You know, we have sort of a whole host of things that people can try to do in that sense, be it behavioral strategies in terms of like grounding strategies, or sometimes relaxation strategies. There could be cognitive strategies where people learn how to look at some of those unhelpful thoughts that they might have in these situations and try to do different sort of perspective taking, or learn how to do more balanced thinking. That comes more from what we call like cognitive behavioral therapy, where we start to look at those kinds of things together.
And then there's medication, which I know,
of course,
I've observed. I mean, I don't have a control. I don't have me sitting next to me, never been medicated, but I have found that it helps with anxiety. I take something called beta blockers or propranolol before. I mean, I used to take it a lot more before performing. You know, it was part of when I did a live radio show every night for Bell Media, it was like part of my routine. 45 minutes before the show, I take, you know, 2.5, just a very light dose, like 2.5 milligrams of that stuff. You know, that's something I arrived to talking to a psychiatrist, but can medication, what role does medication play in helping people manage this stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, as a psychologist, I don't prescribe, so that definitely falls outside of my scope. As you said, a psychiatrist was able to do that for you. Of course, there's lots of individuals that I work with who do find that medication can be very beneficial. So it's definitely something that I will talk to people about, more in the sense of supporting them to, speak with their physician to figure out whether that would play a role in their treatment for sure. And like yourself, lots of people will say that they're able to work with someone and get to the point where they find something helpful that hopefully, in addition to therapy, can also really allow them to really navigate the world differently with anxiety. We're not trying to eliminate it. We're trying to have a different relationship to anxiety.
Interesting. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I know there's like that line between like prescribing doctors and then like talk therapy and all that. You got to be careful.
Yes.
You can't be prescribed. Not important. If you have a friend, family member who is dealing with this stuff, what's a good way to provide support or kind of help in that way?
That's a great question. I would say one of the first pieces that we want to think about is education, right? Because you want to understand what is it that they're experiencing, what is it that it looks like, if you will, when they have anxiety, right? So I think that part's really important because sometimes, very understandably, family members, loved ones will go at things from a comfort perspective or a reassurance perspective that sometimes can even feed that anxiety cycle for the person, right? Because they're looking for reassurance, but sometimes their anxiety is also looking for reassurance. So that in and of itself isn't always, unfortunately, the most helpful strategy, even though it's coming from a very good place, right? I think listening to the person in terms of trying to validate, be there for them, understand what it is that they're experiencing is really important. I say sometimes probably people want more or less advice in terms of what they're experiencing in that moment, right? And if the person is in therapy and they're open to it with consent, sometimes it can be really helpful for a family member to attend like a therapy session, more from a coaching perspective, just to learn like, what can I do? What are things we can agree upon? What language can I use when my loved one is really overcome with anxiety and really, overtaken by it such that it's a little bit hard to connect with them and help them.
Now I'm thinking I got to invite my Jewish mother to my weekly therapy session with my psychiatrist, just honestly for the entertainment value. Let's take a quick break and continue this conversation. I'm liking where it's going. Sure. I'm here with Dr. Marlene Taube-Schiff. She works with Anxiety Canada and is a registered psychologist. We are back talking OCD, anxiety, PTSD with Dr. Marlene Taube-Schiff, who works with Anxiety Canada and is a registered psychologist. Marlene, how's the conversation been? You said, it's harder to prepare for these because they're a bit more free form. Did it live up to the expectations, or am I the worst interview you've ever talked to?
Not at all. I think often when you start talking, it usually feels much better than you think it's going to, which I guess is that idea of anticipatory anxiety, right? Where we don't know exactly what's coming and we're kind of prepared for anything that might happen. And then the hope is once you get into it, you kind of feel okay, right?
Yes, true for public speaking, true for speaking at work, true for podcasts. These are environments where the people who are listening or the people you're talking to want the discussion, want the presentation to be a success. Not true for stand-up comedy. The audience.
Only you could tell me that, David. Luckily, I've never endured that myself. So.
I don't know. The idea of like it's standing in front of 100 people who choose not to have a good time rather than have one with you. That's a special experience.
It sounds very stressful. Yes,
it is. Stressful. I grew a lot. My producer has a funny question that I found interesting. I've long believed and I've observed that when people are experiencing anxiety or in any kind of dizzy, telling them to calm down is like the worst thing you can do. And I was watching a TV show, Below Deck, actually.
Okay.
And the captain said, never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down when someone's yelled, calm down at them. And I just love this one. Fair. So I feel like sometimes people get it wrong when they're observing others dealing with this kind of stuff by just thinking like, toughen up, calm down. Would you agree with that?
I think that's fair. I mean, I think like many of these things, it comes from a really good place, right? The person who's observing it wants the person to be able to calm down. So that might be where that language comes from. I think things that can be helpful is for the person, the other person, if you will, the support person, we can call them, to kind of be calm themselves, right? So to not actually sort of explode with the person, get dysregulated alongside the other person who's dysregulated. So I think that's important. I think, again, like we were talking about that validation in terms of, I can see how you're feeling. I can see that like things are feeling really overwhelming for you right now for whatever reason it might be happening. And then if the support person is able to sort of maybe fit in some strategies to help them, maybe they take a few deep breaths together, right? Or maybe they engage in some grounding strategies together, where they kind of look around, identify things they see, hear, think, feel, things that person, hopefully the support person might have a little bit of that in their back pocket to be able to help the person that they're with.
I once was not having a great time in therapy, and this is an old therapist of mine, and she just said, let's focus on our breathing together. It was a small thing. Yes. I had a panic. Yeah. I think maybe only the one or two times I've actually had a panic attack in therapy. And I've tried that with, not often, with a friend once where she was going through it. And I said, let's just focus on our breathing together. And it was,
How was that?
She later said it was a great tip. I mean, I don't know if it's like, doctor recommended, but that was something that rather.
Oh yeah, for sure. It would be. I mean, if someone in a session was really, spontaneously or triggered and something like that happened, you do want them to try to come back a little bit closer to their baseline to be able to then do other things that they might want to do, right?
Okay. So I want to talk a bit about Anxiety Canada, but I do have one more question. If anyone is listening and they've never sought help for anxiety that's caused them a lot of strife or issues, maybe professionally, maybe at school, maybe socially, and up until this point, they've kind of suffered privately. What would you recommend to someone who's ready or is willing or is wanting to seek help? What are some first steps you can take? Because I think this can be daunting. Like, I know the first time I went to a therapist, it was pretty daunting. I was in a pretty cruddy place.
Do you mean, David, in terms of finding a therapist, or like literally being with the therapist and how to sort of find the right fit and things like that?
I think. Thank you for asking. Clarifying the question. Up until today, they've suffered privately, kept it to themselves, and they are ready and want to seek help. What would the first step be?
Right. So, I mean, I can speak from, within like Ontario, Canada.
Sure.
Some people are fortunate enough to have like a family physician, so they could certainly visit that person to be able to potentially get some recommendations.
That's how I did it.
Yeah, that can be really helpful. I can also say, another role that I have, I'm the president of the Ontario Psychological Association, and we have an amazing referral pathway service called Ask for Help. And that's something, if people can afford something privately, that they can even get matched up with anyone across Ontario that's part of that system. So those kinds of pathways, when they exist in your community, can be really helpful. Because if you Googling, let's be honest, you can Google these things, and it's probably a little more work at that point, right? That you're kind of sifting through it and trying to find someone that feels like a good fit. But sometimes that can be an amazing way of finding, you read some blogs maybe on someone's website, get a feel for the kinds of services they offer. A lot of therapists also will offer, at least that I'm aware of within my community, what we call like a little bit of a meet and greet, So you can like talk to someone without charge. You can talk to several people, right? And be like, oh, what's the alliance feeling like? Does this feel like a good fit? Does this person work in areas that I'm experiencing? Do they have training that kind of resonates with the kind of problems that I want help for? I think all those things can be helpful in terms of figuring out the right fit.
Got it. Okay, well, let's talk Anxiety Canada. Do you want to tell me about the group and what you guys are up to and kind of where I can find info and all that?
Yeah, so Anxiety Canada, you Google Anxiety Canada, it comes right up. My role on it is part of being a member of the Scientific Advisory Committee. So within that, Anxiety Canada in a general sense is an amazing hub of information for all the anxiety disorders, and now launching amazing OCD resources and initiatives as well, where there's a podcast, called the Anxiety Stories. So we can, people can read that. We just launched some OCD podcasts that are coming out through Anxiety Canada, which is also amazing. They have their Action Anxiety Day in June, so people can also better understand, some of the resources and the information that comes out. A lot of it is about, if I was thinking of a mission, it's really about disseminating evidence-based information and intervention all across Canada, and of course, really all across the world, because anyone can access it, of course, because they're online. They also have what's called MindShift app, which is it's a free app. It's CBT based. It's been designed by really great people within the CBT field. And it really can allow people to access different tools and strategies to be able to help in a self-directed way with anxiety. There's a support group that's offered if you sort of look at the MindShift app through that as well, just a kind of free online support group. So they've really dedicated themselves to disseminating information in a way that, I find the information to be fantastic. I didn't develop it, so I'm not saying it with any, there's absolutely no kickback that I get. I'm a volunteer that works on the advisory committee. So,
I can't imagine that Anxiety Canada is like this big profiteering capitalist organization. Not in my wildest dreams.
No, exactly. I just want to be sort of fully disclosing. I don't mention it, but I use the information with my clients. I always refer them there. The information is based in science. It's evidence-based. It really allows people to get that education that, you don't always know where you're getting education from, right? When you just do a search, is this real? Does this reflect the research and the science? And you always know with Anxiety Canada that you're getting that.
Cool. I was jotting down things. Usually I jot down things while people are speaking to think of follow-up questions, but I'm jotting them down because I'm interested. Like an anxiety podcast, that sounds kind of interesting to me. I really do like listening to podcasts that are very different than the work that I do. And then this app is kind of interesting. Is it available globally or is it a Canada?
Yeah, it's available. You just Google MindShift app and it comes right up. And I use it with my clients all the time. I sort of direct them to it and we walk through it to set them up and orient them to it and all those kinds of things.
And it's anxietycanada.com?
It is, exactly. That's how you can find it.
Excellent. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for doing this with me. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I appreciate you asking me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marlene. Dr. Marlene Taube-Schiff. She works with Anxiety Canada and is a registered psychologist. That is our show. Thank you for listening, and thank you to caller David from the beginning of the show. You are the light of this show, the light of my life, maybe the light of everyone's world. I'll be back tomorrow, and happy Thursday.